All right, welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something, well, pretty different. We've got a white paper here someone sent our way.
Oh, yeah, this looks interesting.
It's by Randall B. White, and it's called Founding Code, a framework for impartial artificial intelligence grounded in the principles of the United States Founding Fathers. Quite a mouthful, huh?
Yeah, wow. That's quite a title, Founding Code.
Oh,
Okay, so we're talking AI and the Founding Fathers. Hmm, that's a combo I wouldn't have immediately thought of.
right. It definitely piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
And, the core problem that White tackles here is something we hear a lot about these days: bias in AI.
Yeah, it's a huge concern.
Yeah.
We're basically building these incredible, powerful systems that learn from the data we feed them. But so much of that data, well, it reflects all the existing biases and inequalities of the world, doesn't it?
Exactly. And White lays out some pretty stark examples of how that bias can manifest. Like, imagine an AI that spits out politically slanted content because of the data it was trained on. Or, even worse, think about crucial areas like judicial algorithms or healthcare AI. If those systems are trained on biased data, well, the consequences could be really serious.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking potentially unfair outcomes in legal cases or biased medical diagnoses. That's pretty scary stuff.
It is. And what I found really interesting is how White kind of critiques the common approaches to tackling AI bias, like setting up ethics boards or conducting bias audits.
Oh, what does he say about those?
Well, he suggests that they're a step in the right direction, of course, but maybe they're not enough. He argues they often lack a kind of, a solid philosophical anchor to really guide these AI systems toward true impartiality.
Oh, I see. Like a foundational set of principles to steer them in the right direction from the get-go. I like that.
Yeah. And that leads us to the really unique proposition at the heart of this paper: founders-based AI. White suggests we train these systems on the writings and philosophy of, you guessed it, the American founding fathers and the Enlightenment thinkers.
Hmm. So instead of reflecting the biases of current data,
Yeah.
we base the AI on the kind of, I don't know, timeless principles of liberty and justice.
Yeah, exactly. At first, it might seem like a bit of a wild idea, but the more you think about it, the more you realize how these foundational ideas could actually provide a pretty strong bedrock for impartial AI.
It makes you think, for sure. So today, we're really going deep into this founders-based AI concept, right?
We are. We'll try to unpack how White envisions it working, what the actual building blocks of the system would be, and yeah, we can't shy away from some of the potential challenges and implications too.
Right. Sounds good. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with this idea of ideological drift that White talks about, how current AI can absorb the biases present in massive data sets. Can you break down why this vast amount of data can actually be a problem when it comes to impartiality?
Sure. Think of it this way. Right now, we're training a lot of AI on huge amounts of data, right? Like billions of online articles, social media posts, you name it.
Yeah, we're basically feeding them the internet.
Right. But the internet and all the data it contains, well, it's a snapshot of the world as it is now. And our world is full of ongoing debates, different perspectives, historical inequalities, the whole nine yards. So when an AI learns from all of that, it's inevitably going to absorb those imbalances, right?
So it's not that anyone is intentionally building bias AI. It's more like the AI is just picking up on the patterns and biases that already exist in the data it's given.
Exactly. You could think of it like if you train an AI on historical legal data, and that data reflects disparities in sentencing based on, say, race or socioeconomic background, the AI might unconsciously perpetuate those same disparities.
Right, even though that's clearly not what we want. And it's the same thing with political bias or censorship concerns. The AI is essentially just mirroring what it sees in the data.
Yeah. And that's where White's emphasis on a philosophical anchor comes in. It's like, without a solid set of ethical principles to guide these AI systems, we're just playing whack-a-mole with bias, aren't we? We're addressing the symptoms, but not the underlying cause.
Makes sense. So, to address this problem, White proposes this historical cognition hypothesis. What exactly is that, and how does it relate to founders-based AI?
Okay, so the historical cognition hypothesis, it's kind of the core idea behind this whole approach. It basically suggests that we train AI on a very specific, curated corpus of texts. We're talking about 18th century American political thought and, more broadly, Enlightenment-era philosophy. Think writings of Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton, the big names.
So instead of feeding the AI everything on the internet, we're giving it a focused education in foundational principles.
Yeah, exactly. By immersing the AI in the intellectual world of that era, The idea is that we can instill in it a much deeper, more enduring commitment to impartiality.
And what are the potential upsides of this approach?
Well, White outlines a few key benefits. First, it could provide a much more stable and consistent framework for the AI's decision-making processes. Rather than being swayed by all the changing opinions and debates of today, it would operate from a more timeless, principled foundation.
So it's like grounding the AI in something more solid and lasting.
Right. And second, the focus would shift from just reflecting what is to understanding what should be. The emphasis is on those universal principles of liberty, justice, reason, those core values that the founders were so passionate about. And by embedding these principles in the AI's very structure, the hope is to create a system that inherently strives for impartiality.
So it's almost like going back to the source code of democracy, so to speak, and using that as the basis for AI's ethical framework.
I like that analogy. It really captures the essence of what White is proposing.
Okay, so we've covered the why behind this idea. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts, the how. What does this founders-based AI actually look like? What are the components?
So White outlines a pretty detailed architecture for this system. It's got three main parts. The first one is what he calls the foundational corpus. And this isn't just any random collection of old documents. It's a very carefully chosen set of texts that represent the core debates and philosophical underpinnings of that era.
So what are we talking about here? What specific documents would be included?
Well, the core of it would be the biggies, of course.
Mm-hmm.
The Federalist Papers, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. Those key texts that really laid the groundwork for the American system of government.
Right, but I imagine it's not just about praising those documents uncritically.
Oh, absolutely not. It's really important to capture the full spectrum of thought from that time. So White also includes the Anti-Federalist Papers, which presented counter-arguments and concerns about the proposed Constitution.
So it's about understanding the nuances of the debate, the different sides of the argument.
Yeah, exactly. And to really flesh out the founders' thinking, he even suggests including personal letters and speeches to get a more, behind-the-scenes look at their reasoning.
That's interesting. So the AI is getting a pretty comprehensive education in the ideas of the Founding Fathers. And this foundational corpus, that's just the first piece of the puzzle, right?
Right. The next layer is what White calls the language model configuration. This is all about how the AI is actually going to process and understand the language of those historical texts. And, 18th century English can be pretty different from how we talk and write today.
Yeah, you can't just feed those documents into any old AI and expect it to get it.
Exactly. So White proposes creating a specialized tokenizer that's tailored specifically to the grammatical structures and linguistic conventions of that era.
So it's like giving the AI a crash course in 18th century grammar and vocabulary.
Precisely. And he also suggests developing special embedding vectors that capture concepts like logic, virtue, civic duty, those big ideas that were central to the founders' world.
So it's not just understanding the words, but also grasping the underlying values and concepts.
That's it. And maybe the coolest part is that White suggests imposing output constraints on the AI. These would encourage the AI to write and communicate in a style similar to the Founding Fathers.
Wow, so we could actually see an AI crafting arguments and texts that sound like they came straight out of the Federalist Papers.
That's the idea. It would be pretty amazing to see.
Okay, so we've got the foundational texts and a language model designed to understand them. What's the final layer?
The last piece is what White calls the ethical algorithms. This is where those abstract principles we've been talking about get translated into actual decision-making processes for the AI.
Right, because ultimately we want this AI to be able to do more than just recite historical texts. We want it to be able to make judgments and decisions that are guided by those foundational values.
Exactly. So one of the things White proposes is building logic nodes that are inspired by Federalist #10. Now, Federalist #10 is all about how to deal with factions, groups with special interests that might try to undermine the common good. And White suggests equipping the AI with a framework to analyze and address similar challenges in today's world.
So it's like giving the AI a set of tools to identify and mitigate those threats to impartiality, both in the data it processes and the decisions it makes.
That's right. And he also proposes building in governance modules inspired by the system of checks and balances. The idea that power should be divided to prevent any one entity from becoming too dominant.
Right. And wouldn't these modules help the AI assess different systems or policies to ensure they are in line with the Founding Fathers' ideas about limited government and individual liberty?
Exactly. And finally, he suggests incorporating constitutional interpretive layers that use what's called originalist reasoning.
Now, hold on. For those of us who aren't legal scholars, what exactly does originalist reasoning mean?
Well, in simple terms, it means interpreting the Constitution based on its original public meaning. So, like, how would the people who wrote and ratified it have understood it back then?
So the AI wouldn't be trying to reinterpret the Constitution for the modern world. It would be trying to understand it the way the founders intended.
Yeah, that's the gist of it.
Okay, that makes sense. So that gives us a pretty good overview of the architecture of this founders-based AI. Now, where does White see this technology actually being used? What are some potential applications?
Well, he highlights several really interesting areas. One is in judicial systems. You could imagine this AI acting as a co-pilot for judges and legal scholars, providing unbiased insights grounded in constitutional principles.
So like a super-powered research assistant that can analyze legal arguments and precedents.
Yeah, but with a deep understanding of foundational principles. And that could be really valuable for ensuring impartiality in legal decisions.
What other areas does he mention?
Well, another one is legislative analysis. This kind of AI could analyze proposed laws through the lens of the founders' ideas about limited government and individual liberty. It could help identify potential long-term risks to foundational rights that might get overlooked in the heat of political debate.
That sounds like a really useful tool for policymakers, a way to ensure that laws are being crafted with those core principles in mind.
Right. And White also envisions applications in education and civic engagement. Think of an AI that could teach history and civics from first principles, maybe even generate debates between virtual founding fathers on current issues.
Oh, wow. That would be amazing. A way to make history come alive and really engage people with these complex ideas.
Exactly. And one of the more unexpected applications he mentions is using founders-based AI to actually oversee other AI systems.
Oh, that's interesting. So like a kind of AI watchdog, making sure that other AI systems aren't drifting too far from those core principles of impartiality.
That's the idea. And it could be a really powerful tool for ensuring ethical AI development across the board.
So founders-based AI could be a really versatile tool with a lot of potential applications. But surely there are challenges too. What are some of the limitations or concerns that White acknowledges?
Oh, of course. He's very upfront about the potential hurdles. I mean, one of the biggest challenges is applying 18th century ideas to a world that's so different from the one the founders lived in.
Yeah, how do you take principles designed for a pre-industrial, largely agrarian society and apply them to the complexities of the 21st century? That's a big question.
It is. And White acknowledges that the initial focus on the founding fathers might not capture the full diversity of human thought and experience. There's a lot of voices and perspectives missing from that era.
And how does he propose addressing that?
He suggests that the core principles of liberty and reason are a good starting point, but the system needs to be able to evolve and incorporate other ethical frameworks over time.
So it's not about rigidly sticking to the 18th century. It's about using those ideas as a foundation and building on them.
Exactly. And there's also the challenge of interpretation. Even humans can disagree about what the founders really meant or how their ideas should apply to today's issues. So ensuring that the AI is interpreting these texts accurately and fairly, that's a big hurdle.
Right. And how do we make sure that the AI itself isn't susceptible to bias?
Well, that's where the idea of Bias Shield AI certification comes in. It's basically a human verification system to ensure that anyone developing or using founders-based AI is adhering to those core principles of impartiality.
So it's not just about the AI itself, it's also about the people who are building and using it.
Yeah, it's about creating a whole ecosystem that's grounded in those values.
Okay, that's really interesting. Finally, Wright paints a pretty big picture, a long-term vision for what founders-based AI could achieve. What does he see as the ultimate goal?
Well, he hopes that this technology could become a powerful safeguard for those foundational principles in a world that's becoming increasingly reliant on AI. He envisions a future where AI helps us make more impartial and just decisions, a future where it helps rebuild public trust in these powerful systems.
So it's not just about preventing bad things from happening. It's also about using AI to actively promote those core values.
Right. He even uses the term republic of algorithms to describe this ideal future, where AI systems are self-governing impartial, and deeply rooted in those foundational principles.
Republic of Algorithms, that's a striking image. So to wrap up, the core argument of White's founding code is that by grounding AI in the principles of the U.S. Founding Fathers, we can create more impartial and trustworthy systems.
Absolutely. And for you, dear listeners, the key takeaway is this. We've explored how bias can creep into current AI, White's bold solution of using historical political thought to create more ethical AI. And we even delved into the architecture of such a system and its potential uses and challenges.
The paper ends with a powerful line. If AI is to be humanity's co-pilot, then its moral compass must be more than code. It must be constitution.
Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is, and it really leaves us with a lot to think about. Could anchoring AI in those foundational principles be a viable path to a more just and impartial future? We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. And if you're interested in exploring these ideas further, we highly recommend checking out White's full paper, Founding Code. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
See you next time.
Take care, everyone.